Hello, welcome to chess lecture number 5. In the previous chess lectures I've covered the basic movement of the pieces, some basic checkmating patterns, and chess tactics. Now I just want to talk about the phases of the game of chess and basic game strategy. And the game of chess can actually be divided into 3 phases. And these phases are, the first one is the opening, the second one is the middle game, and the third phase of the game is the end game. So let's cover these a little bit more detail. And the reason I'm going to cover them a little bit more in detail or describe them is because the rest of the lecture series will be based upon studying these 3 phases of the game so we can better improve our play in that phase of the game. Okay, so let's start by discussing what the opening is. Okay, the opening is basically the first phase of the game. I've covered that. So what is it? Well, just reading down my lecture notes, it's the phase where the players get their pieces out and generally are going to get ready for battle. Okay, I guess I should have wrote that in there. Here, let me write that in there. I'll pause and write that in. So I basically wrote that in here. So I basically said where the players get their pieces out and they prepare for battle, meaning just the rest of the game. It can be generally defined as the first 10 or 15 moves of the game. Now there's no, if you don't know, there's actually no, you can never sort of point at a chess game or say, you know, beyond move 10 you're always in the middle game or you're out of the opening phase. The opening phase can last maybe as long as 20 moves, and in some of the opening books you can see things listed as long as like about 25 moves, but they're probably into the middle game. But generally the opening is the first 10 or 15 moves. And in my future lectures, or actually basically the rest of lecture 5 or the other subsequent lectures in lecture 5, I'm going to review the 3 opening goals. Okay, and these, I'm just going to tell you what they are, then I'll cover them in a future lecture. They're control the center, develop your pieces, and castle. Okay, so I'm going to be covering these principles of opening play. And then I'm going to give you some 10 opening guidelines, meaning what I just told you may not help you exactly with what moves should I be making, so I'm going to make a little bit more specific guidelines of how you can make maybe better opening moves, or how do we apply these principles. And then actually in lectures 6 and 7 I'm going to cover common chess openings, like, just to name a few, the Sicilian, the French defense, the Italian game, things like this. That way you can see various openings and what the opening moves are and the reasons behind the opening moves. Okay, now let's move on to the middle game. Okay, the middle game is the second and most complex game phase. You can find many books written on the opening and the end game, but the middle game is a very complex and difficult area of the game to play. There's a lot of things going on. Basically, the middle game can be considered, or you're in the middle game when you've accomplished your 3 opening goals, which I'm going to cover a little bit later. So that's sort of like getting your pieces out. So once you get your pieces out, things like that, you're sort of in the middle game. And things sort of shift. The goals now shift, or what you should be doing is shifting. Actually, this is where a lot of players have a problem. They get their pieces out, and they really don't know what to do. And this is the game phase that you're in. So if you ever play a game of chess and get everything out and go, what am I supposed to be doing? You may be in this phase of the game. And play, play is characterized by strategy, which is planning, positional play, and tactics. Now, positional play, I am going to cover this in more detail. These are things like open lines, pawn structure, piece mobility. These are concepts, and hopefully I'll be able to show you how to apply these concepts to your game. The reason this is important is because positional play leads to the ability to utilize tactics. Now, your opponent may make a mistake, but generally you're going to be able to utilize the tactics that I covered earlier because you're playing very good positional play. And if you don't understand exactly what I'm talking about, I'm going to be covering these in future lectures, but I just sort of want to review, how we're going to be studying and what exactly the middle game is. So it's characterized by, the middle game is characterized by strategy, positional playing, tactics. So just like I said, I'm going to be reviewing basic strategy and planning, and then I'm going to review the basics of positional play. Okay, so now let's move on to the end game. Okay, the end game is the third and final phase of the game. You may actually not make it to an end game. A lot of games actually end in the middle game with your opponent may resign, you may win a lot of material, or you may checkmate the king. So not all games actually make it to an end game. So if you reach this, it's the final phase, and it's the phase where a lot of the pieces have already been captured. So I think one definition I read, it said the value of the pieces is equal to or less than 13, not including the king. So you'd have to count up. Remember, we covered piece value, but I've seen stuff covered in chess magazines where there's definitely more than 13 points on the board. So it's sort of hard to exactly say when the end game actually occurs, and we're just going to define it as when many pieces have been captured. And now, remember I discussed how different phases have different elements to them. In the end game, the pawns and king activity become much more important. Okay, this is a sort of a hallmark of when you start to notice these two things going on, you're in the end game. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to review endgame goals in future lectures and review the common types of endgames. Believe it or not, as you progress in your chess play, you may find yourself being able to play a good game and not being able to finish well. Well, guess what? This is because you probably need to study or review your endgames. And what I plan on doing is hopefully give you some basic endgame knowledge. Therefore, you can, if you play a good game, you can finish it well. Okay, and the last thing I want to cover is basic game strategy. Now, this is probably very fundamental, but most people don't realize that there's actually only two very, very maybe high-level game strategies. The first game strategy is to, once you get all your pieces out, is to develop a plan to attack and checkmate the enemy king. Sounds simple. That's the object of the game, right? So that's obviously one of the fundamental strategies. Another fundamental strategy is actually to get your pieces out and to win material and then simplify to a winning endgame. Meaning, how can I put this to you? Let's say, this is like a military example. Let's say you're in a, soldiers, you're playing 10 against 8. Well, that's pretty even. But if you're able to knock out 1 for 1, and work it way down where each side is eliminating one guy at a time, there would be a point where it'd be 3 against 1. And then you would say, well, 3 against 1, that's an obviously win for the 3 against 1. The 3 are easily going to win against the 1. That's the idea in chess is to, and I'll cover this in more detail, but is to win material and then eliminate all the pieces, and then you'll have an overwhelming winning end game. And I just want to point out that strategy number 1 often leads to strategy number 2. So those are the two most basic strategies in chess, and you should probably keep them in mind when developing a plan, or they will be the fundamental backbone or strategy to any plan you develop. Well, that concludes this lecture. I know that was mainly a talking lecture, but the rest of the lectures will actually cover more, or at least lecture 5 is going to cover the basics of and strategies and principles of the opening.